She sold one night to save her father, but the billionaire demanded her heart too. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's story. She sold one night to save her father, but the billionaire demanded her heart too. The rain had been falling for hours, thick and relentless, turning the New York streets into rivers of reflection and neon. Inside a tiny, dimly lit apartment, Elena Cruz pressed a damp cloth against her father's forehead. His breathing was shallow, the worn oxygen machine buzzing unevenly beside the bed. The smell of disinfectant mixed with fear hung in the air. "Just hold on, Papa," she whispered, clutching his frail hand. "Please, just a little longer." The doctor's words still echoed in her head. "Without the payment tonight, we stop the treatment. $75,000. An impossible number for a woman who had just lost her job and whose savings could barely buy groceries. When her father coughed again, a thread of blood staining the sheet, Elena stood up, trembling. She picked up her phone and stared at the last message from an anonymous number. "One night, 75,000, no questions asked. Hotel Marlowe, room 804. Her stomach turned, but desperation had already made the choice for her. She slipped into her worn coat, wiped her tears, and stepped into the storm. The taxi ride felt endless. Raindrops streaked the windows like tears that refused to stop. The driver glanced at her once through the mirror but said nothing. She was pale, clutching her bag like it contained the last pieces of her soul. When she arrived, the lobby of the Marlowe was gold and glass, the kind of place that smelled like money and silence. Her shoes squeaked on the marble floor. A concierge lifted his head but looked away quickly. People like her did not belong here. Room 804. Her heart pounded as she knocked. The door opened to reveal a man sitting in the shadows, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled, a faint scar tracing the edge of his jaw. "Miss Cruz?" His voice was calm, deep, without judgment. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "You are the one who sent the message?" He studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the envelope on the table. 75,000. You can count it if you want." Elena's throat tightened. "My father needs surgery. I will do whatever you ask." The man leaned forward, the light finally catching his face, sharp features, dark eyes that seemed older than his age. "I only ask for honesty," he said quietly. "No lies, no pretenses, just one night." Elena froze, unsure what those words truly meant. There was no hunger in his tone, no arrogance, only a strange, heavy sadness. For a heartbeat, she thought he might change his mind, that he might let her walk away. But he simply turned to the window, his reflection caught in the rain outside. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because," he said, still looking at the glass, "you did not run when you could have." She did not understand what he meant. Not yet. But she stepped forward, signing the paper he slid across the table. The sound of the pen scratching felt like a heartbeat being sealed away. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, drowning the last of her doubts. The deal was done. Elena Cruz had just sold one night of her life to save her father's, unaware that the man in front of her, Alexander Grant, was no ordinary client but a billionaire testing the limits of compassion and about to risk his own heart in return. The morning light crept through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment, but it did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like aftermath. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened, while she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands that had signed a contract to save a life. Her father was resting peacefully now, the hospital having confirmed that the payment had cleared. The doctors called it a miracle. Elena knew better. She should have felt relief, even gratitude, but what she felt instead was emptiness. The night before replayed in fragments the quiet room, the envelope of money, the stranger's unreadable eyes. He had been gentle, almost too quiet, asking her about her father, about her dreams, about the way she still believed in kindness. It was strange, almost human. But when she woke before dawn, he was gone. No note, no goodbye. Only a silver necklace left on the nightstand, engraved with 2 letters. A.G. Elena closed her eyes, gripping the necklace in her palm. She promised herself she would never wear it. 3 days passed before the hospital called again. A new donor had paid not only for her father's surgery, but also for a full rehabilitation plan, physical therapy, medication, and a year of care. When she asked for the donor's name, the nurse smiled kindly and said, "He wishes to stay anonymous." That night, Elena walked home under the orange glow of the streetlights. Every corner of the city felt heavier, as if it carried her secret. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, until she was drenched. She did not run. She stood still, letting the rain wash her face, her guilt, her shame. Somewhere between the thunder and her heartbeat, she made a quiet vow. She would never let her life be bought again. Weeks later, her father's health began to improve, but the bills continued to grow. Elena searched for work everywhere, restaurants, clinics, grocery stores, but doors kept closing. One morning, she passed a tall glass building with a bronze plaque that read, "Grant Foundation." Through the window, she saw people in suits, holding clipboards, talking about something that looked important. She hesitated, then walked in. At the reception desk, a woman smiled. "Are you here for the open position?" Elena blinked. "What position?" "Maintenance and clerical," the woman said. "We are short-staffed. You can fill this out." Elena filled out the form, using her neatest handwriting, and left without expectation. But the next morning, her phone rang. "Miss Cruz?" a calm voice said. "This is Clara from Grant Foundation. You are hired. Please report at 9 tomorrow." Elena froze. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Maybe this was the start of something better. She had no idea that by walking into that building, she was stepping right back into the orbit of the man she thought she would never see again, Alexander Grant, the stranger from room 804, the man whose money had saved her father's life. The first week at the Grant Foundation passed quietly. Elena worked long hours, moving between stacks of files and the echo of polished hallways. The building was modern, bright, and cold, a world far from the one she came from. She did her best to blend in, keeping her eyes down, never asking questions. She thought she could disappear in the rhythm of work, but fate had a way of finding her. It was late one evening when it happened. Most of the staff had gone home, and Elena was finishing her cleaning duties on the executive floor. The sound of rain hit the windows softly as the elevator doors slid open. She looked up and froze. Alexander Grant stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his expression calm but distant. The man from room 804, the man whose money had saved her father's life. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. He ended the call and turned toward her. Their eyes met. "Elena," he said quietly, as if testing her name. Her hands trembled around the mop handle. "Mr. Grant," she managed to reply. He took a slow step forward. "You work here now." "I needed a job," she said quickly. "I did not know this was your company." He nodded once, his face unreadable. "I did not know you would walk through my doors." Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the lights. Then he said, "Did your father recover?" Elena's throat tightened. "Yes, thanks to someone." He exhaled, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good. I am glad." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her again. "You do not need to be afraid of me, Elena." She turned back sharply. "Afraid? No, Mr. Grant. I am not afraid. I just do not want to owe you anything more." For a moment he looked like he might say something else, but then he stepped aside. "You do not owe me anything," he said softly. She walked past him without looking back, but as she entered the elevator, she caught his reflection in the mirror standing alone, hands in his pockets, eyes filled with something she could not name. That night, Elena could not sleep. She replayed every word, every glance, trying to convince herself it meant nothing. But deep down, she knew the truth that fate was not finished with them yet. Weeks passed quietly, but peace never truly came. Elena moved through the foundation like a ghost, careful to stay unseen whenever Alexander was near. Yet, the building itself seemed to conspire against her. Every corridor, every meeting, every unexpected glance made it harder to pretend he was not there. She focused on work. She filed reports, balanced donations, and stayed late to clean the office floors. Her father was getting better, walking again, and that should have been enough. But every night she went home, she could still hear Alexander's voice the way he had said her name, the weight behind his apology. She tried to bury it, but guilt and anger are hard to silence once awakened. One evening, while delivering paperwork to Clara's office, Elena overheard two executives whispering near the door. "Did you hear? The investigation is back," one of them said. "Someone has been stealing from the patient relief fund again. Mr. Grant is furious." Really? I thought he handled that years ago," the other replied. "He did, but it seems someone close to him reopened the wound." Elena froze. The relief fund was what had saved her father's life. If there was corruption inside it, her name might appear somewhere it should not. That night, she could not sleep. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her chest. Finally, she decided to face him. The next morning, she climbed to the executive floor. The secretary tried to stop her, but Alexander's voice came from behind the glass door. "Let her in." He was standing by the window, phone in hand, his expression hard. When he saw her, his shoulders softened. "Elena," he said quietly, "I was going to call you." "I heard about the investigation," she said. "Tell me the truth. Did you use me as part of it?" He set his phone down and turned to face her fully. "At first, yes, but not anymore." Her breath caught. "So you admit it?" "Yes," he said. "The night I met you, I was trying to trace illegal payouts made in my company's name. I wanted to see who was willing to sell their dignity for money. But when I met you, I saw someone willing to sacrifice everything for someone else. You were never part of the crime, Elena. You were proof that goodness still exists." Her voice broke. "You made me believe I was worthless. You let me think that my pain was just another test." I know," he said, stepping closer. "And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. But please believe me when I say this, I never touched you because I respected you too much to turn that night into what it looked like. You saved me that night more than I saved you." Elena stood still, her heart racing. The anger she had held for weeks began to melt into confusion. "Then why bring me here? Why let me work under you?" "Because I wanted you to have control this time," he said. "No secrets, no power games. You decide what happens next." The room went silent except for the hum of the rain against the glass. Elena took a slow breath, her eyes glistening. "Then let me go, Mr. Grant." He looked at her for a long time, pain flickering behind his calm mask. "If that is what you truly want," he said. "But if you ever need help, for any reason, you know where to find me." She nodded once and walked out of his office. But as the elevator doors closed, her reflection trembled in the mirrored glass. For the first time, she was not sure if she was walking away from the man who had hurt her, or from the man who might have loved her all along. Weeks passed quietly, but peace never truly came. Elena moved through the foundation like a ghost, careful to stay unseen whenever Alexander was near. Yet, the building itself seemed to conspire against her. Every corridor, every meeting, every unexpected glance made it harder to pretend he was not there. She focused on work. She filed reports, balanced donations, and stayed late to clean the office floors. Her father was getting better, walking again, and that should have been enough. But every night she went home, she could still hear Alexander's voice the way he had said her name, the weight behind his apology. She tried to bury it, but guilt and anger are hard to silence once awakened. One evening, while delivering paperwork to Clara's office, Elena overheard two executives whispering near the door. "Did you hear? The investigation is back," one of them said. "Someone has been stealing from the patient relief fund again. Mr. Grant is furious." "Really? I thought he handled that years ago," the other replied. "He did, but it seems someone close to him reopened the wound." Elena froze. The relief fund was what had saved her father's life. If there was corruption inside it, her name might appear somewhere it should not. That night, she could not sleep. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her chest. Finally, she decided to face him. The next morning, she climbed to the executive floor. The secretary tried to stop her, but Alexander's voice came from behind the glass door. "Let her in." He was standing by the window, phone in hand, his expression hard. When he saw her, his shoulders softened. "Elena," he said quietly, "I was going to call you." "I heard about the investigation," she said. "Tell me the truth. Did you use me as part of it?" He set his phone down and turned to face her fully. "At first, yes, but not anymore." Her breath caught. "So you admit it?" "Yes," he said. "The night I met you, I was trying to trace illegal payouts made in my company's name. I wanted to see who was willing to sell their dignity for money. But when I met you, I saw someone willing to sacrifice everything for someone else. You were never part of the crime, Elena. You were proof that goodness still exists." Her voice broke. You made me believe I was worthless. You let me think that my pain was just another test. I know, he said, stepping closer, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. But please believe me when I say this, I never touched you because I respected you too much to turn that night into what it looked like. You saved me that night more than I saved you. Elena stood still, her heart racing. The anger she had held for weeks began to melt into confusion. Then why bring me here? Why let me work under you? Because I wanted you to have control this time, he said. No secrets, no power games. You decide what happens next. The room went silent except for the hum of the rain against the glass. Elena took a slow breath, her eyes glistening. Then let me go, Mr. Grant. He looked at her for a long time, pain flickering behind his calm mask. If that is what you truly want, he said. But if you ever need help, for any reason, you know where to find me. She nodded once and walked out of his office. But as the elevator doors closed, her reflection trembled in the mirrored glass. For the first time, she was not sure if she was walking away from the man who had hurt her, or from the man who might have loved her all along. The next morning, the city woke under a gray sky, and Elena felt that same heaviness pressing against her chest. She had left Alexander's office the day before with trembling hands, her heart caught between anger and something she refused to name. She told herself it was over, that she had said what needed to be said, but his words lingered like a shadow she could not escape. At the cafe near the hospital, she poured coffee and wiped tables, trying to quiet her thoughts. Her father was getting stronger now, walking with a cane and smiling more often. Every night he asked about her day, and every night she lied, saying everything was fine. But inside, she was restless. The truth between her and Alexander had been spoken, yet nothing felt resolved. One afternoon, as she stepped out to take the trash, she noticed a black car parked across the street. A man in a gray suit approached. Miss Cruz? He asked politely. Mr. Grant would like to speak with you. It is important. Her pulse quickened. I told him I am done with the foundation. This is not about the foundation, he said. It is about your father's case. Minutes later, she was back in the same building she had sworn never to enter again. Alexander was waiting in a small conference room, papers spread across the table. He looked tired, but his eyes still carried that same quiet determination. Thank you for coming, he said. I am not here for you, she replied sharply. Say what you need to say. He nodded. Someone in the foundation has been stealing from the medical relief fund, the same account that covered your father's treatment. Elena froze. Are you saying my father's life was part of a crime? No, he said. I am saying your father's case helped me uncover it. You were never involved. You were the proof I needed to stop it. She stared at him, disbelief and anger rising together. You dragged me into your tests again? He shook his head. Not this time. This time, I am asking for your help, not as a CEO, but as a man who wants to make things right. Elena wanted to walk away, but something in his voice stopped her. It was not pride or authority. It was sincerity. Finally, she said quietly, Then tell me what I need to do. And in that moment, for the first time since they met, Alexander did not see the woman he had once pitied. He saw his equal, standing beside him, ready to fight for the truth. The following months brought a calm that neither of them quite trusted. The scandal had ended, the guilty had been punished, and the Grant Foundation was rebuilding its reputation. Yet, behind the polished press releases and smiling photographs, something unspoken lingered between Alexander and Elena. She had returned to work as a consultant for the new patient ethics program, a position offered to her after the investigation. It was honest work-building systems to protect families like hers from ever being exploited again. She accepted because she believed in the mission, not because of the man who led it. Or at least, that is what she told herself. Every morning she saw him across the boardroom table, sleeves rolled up, discussing reforms with the same relentless focus that once intimidated her. He was still powerful, still distant, but different. The arrogance she had seen that first night was gone. In its place was a quiet humility, the kind that came only from learning to lose. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Alexander stopped her in the hallway. Elena, he said, his tone careful. There is something I would like to ask, but I need you to know that you are free to say no. She folded her arms. That sounds serious. He smiled slightly, a trace of nervousness she had never seen before. The foundation is organizing a charity gala next week to announce the new medical fund. I want you to present it with me. You were the reason this reform happened. She hesitated. You want me on stage? In front of cameras again? Yes, he said, but this time it will be on your terms. Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I am not dressing like one of your donors. He laughed softly. Deal. When the night arrived, the ballroom shimmered with golden light. Reporters, doctors, and executives filled the room. Elena wore a simple navy dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. As she stepped onto the stage beside Alexander, the room hushed. Alexander spoke first, his voice steady through the microphone. Months ago, this foundation nearly lost its purpose. We forgot that compassion must always come before profit. One woman reminded us of that truth. He turned to her, eyes gentle. Elena Cruz. The crowd applauded. Elena took a breath, her voice calm but strong. I am not a hero, she said. I am a daughter who refused to stay silent, and tonight we open a fund that belongs to every family who has ever felt powerless. The applause that followed was thunderous, but amid the lights and cameras, Alexander leaned closer and whispered, You did it. She looked up at him, her heart unexpectedly soft. No, she said quietly. We did. After the event, as the guests filtered out, Elena found herself alone on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The air was cool, the sound of distant traffic rising like a hum of life. She thought she was alone until Alexander appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. For the record, he said, handing her one, I prefer this to champagne. She laughed softly. You are learning humility. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth curving. I am learning what matters. There was a pause long enough for both to feel the weight of everything they had been through. Then, with quiet conviction, he said, Elena, I do not want our story to end as a tragedy or a scandal. I want it to mean something real. I do not want to owe you anymore. I want to choose you. Her heart raced, the city lights flickering in her eyes. She set her glass down slowly. And what if I do not trust you yet? Then I will earn it, he said simply. Not as a billionaire, not as a savior, just as a man. The night breeze swept between them, carrying away the last remnants of shame and fear. For the first time, Elena did not turn away, and somewhere between forgiveness and love, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this was what redemption truly looked like, not perfect, not grand, but honest. The days after, the gala felt strangely quiet. For the first time in a long while, there were no reporters, no whispers, no battles left to fight. Elena tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that balcony, to the way Alexander had looked at her, and to the words she had been too afraid to answer. She told herself that it was better this way. He had his world, and she had hers. The distance kept things simple, but simplicity does not silence the heart. Every time the elevator doors opened and she caught a glimpse of him in the hallway, her resolve wavered a little more. One evening, she found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a letter written in Alexander's steady handwriting. Elena, I am leaving for Geneva tomorrow for the Global Health Summit. Before I go, I wanted to thank you not for saving the foundation, but for saving me. You once said you would never let anyone buy your silence again. I hope you know you never have to. He ended it with a single line. If you ever decide to forgive me, I will be waiting. Die. Elena read the note twice, her chest tight. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her bag. That night, she could not sleep. She kept hearing her father's voice, his quiet wisdom echoing like a prayer. Do not let pride steal the good that comes your way. The next morning, she went to the airport. She did not plan it. Her heart simply led her there. Through the crowd, she saw him standing by the gate, looking down at his phone, unaware. Alexander, she called softly. He turned, surprise flashing across his face before it melted into something warmer. Elena? She walked closer. You forgot something. He frowned. What is that? My answer, she said, breath trembling. I do not know if I can forgive everything yet, but I want to try. His eyes softened. That is all I have ever wanted. As the boarding call echoed overhead, he reached out his hand. She took it. For the first time since their story began, there was no contract, no secret, no fear, only 2 people finally choosing each other, freely. The months that followed were quieter, but this time the quiet felt peaceful. Elena began working remotely for the foundation, helping manage new health projects in small towns, while Alexander traveled frequently for international partnerships. They spoke often, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing at all, Yet every conversation felt like a slow healing. He kept his promise. There were no grand gestures, no extravagant gifts, only consistency. Every time he said he would call, he did. Every time he promised to visit, he showed up. Slowly, the distance between them began to close, not through money or power, but through patience. One weekend, Alexander invited her to a rural clinic the foundation had just opened. It was a simple building, painted white and blue, surrounded by children playing with handmade kites. Elena watched as he bent down to speak to one of the kids, his suit jacket off, his shirt sleeves rolled up, laughing without restraint. It was a version of him she had never seen before, unguarded, human. When he noticed her watching, he smiled. "Do you remember what you told me that night in the hotel?" She hesitated, surprised. "I said a lot of things that night." He chuckled softly. "You said people only break rules when they believe in something worth saving. I used to think you were wrong. Now I know you were right." She looked around at the crowd, the patients, the doctors, the hope filling the dusty air, and felt her chest tighten. "You did this, Alexander." He shook his head. "No, we did this." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood together outside the clinic. The light turned the world gold. Alexander glanced at her, his voice quiet but steady. "Elena, I have spent years building things that could last, but nothing I built ever made me feel what this moment does." She smiled faintly. "What does this moment make you feel?" He looked at her for a long second. "Like I finally found something I do not want to lose." She said nothing, but her hand slipped into his, and for once, neither of them looked back. A few months later, Elena returned to the city to attend the foundation's annual board meeting. It was her first time back at headquarters since the investigation, and the building felt different now, lighter, almost alive. Employees greeted her with genuine warmth, calling her Miss Cruz, with respect instead of pity. Alexander was waiting in the conference room when she arrived. He smiled as she entered. "You are right on time." "I always am," she said, teasing lightly. He gestured to a seat beside him. "Today is an important day. The board will vote to make the patient ethics program a permanent department." Elena nodded, glancing at the documents in front of her. "This is what we worked for." He looked at her thoughtfully. "It is what you made possible." The meeting lasted an hour, but when it ended, the board members stood and applauded. The motion passed unanimously. Alexander turned to her and whispered, "Congratulations, Elena. You just changed how this foundation works forever." She smiled, proud but humble. "We did it together." Later, as the room emptied, Alexander remained behind. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar object, the silver necklace he had once left for her that first night, the same one she had abandoned in his office months ago. "I think this belongs to you," he said softly. She stared at it, emotions rising. "I thought you got rid of it." He shook his head. "I kept it as a reminder that some debts cannot be paid with money, only with meaning." Her eyes softened. "And what does it mean to you now?" He took a slow breath. "It means I do not want to keep it anymore unless you take it back willingly." She hesitated for a moment, then reached out, closing her fingers around the necklace. The metal was warm, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. "Then I will keep it," she said quietly, "not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I found." Alexander smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Then maybe it is time for me to give you something new in return." Before she could ask what he meant, he added, "Tomorrow, meet me at the old pier by sunset. I want to show you something." She raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "All right, Mr. Grant, but if this turns out to be another business proposal, I am leaving." He laughed softly. "It will not be business this time, Elena, I promise." As she left the room, the silver necklace glinting against her palm, she could not help but wonder if the man who once tested her heart was finally ready to give her his own. The next evening, the air at the old pier was cool and calm, carrying the faint scent of salt and rain. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and crimson. Elena stood near the railing, her hair blowing gently in the wind, the silver necklace resting against her collarbone. She had almost convinced herself that this was just another of Alexander's symbolic gestures until she heard his footsteps behind her. "You came," he said quietly. She turned and smiled faintly. "You asked, and I was curious." Alexander walked closer, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "Do you remember what you told me the night we first met? You said love and survival cannot exist in the same room." Elena nodded slowly. At the time, I believed that. When people are desperate, love feels like a luxury. He stepped beside her, leaning on the railing. And now? She looked out at the water shimmering under the sunset. Now I think love is what keeps us alive in the first place. He took a breath, his voice steady but soft. Then maybe it is time we stop surviving and start living. Before she could respond, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple ring, no diamonds, no lavish design, just a single band engraved with the words "Lead with Heart." Elena's breath caught. "Alexander," he met her gaze. "You once sold one night to save your father. I have spent every night since trying to be the man worthy of your forgiveness. I do not want another transaction between us, Elena. I want a promise." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you sure this is what you want? Me? Not the idea of redemption?" He smiled gently. "I have had redemption. What I want now is you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The waves whispered below them. The sky blushed deeper, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Elena nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek as she whispered, "Yes." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling slightly. Then, with the same quiet reverence that had once marked their pain, he pulled her into his arms. As the last light of the sun melted into the horizon, two broken souls who had once met through a contract now stood bound by something real, not a deal, not a secret, but love that had survived every test. The camera of life faded on that image. Elena Cruz and Alexander Grant, no longer prisoner and savior, but equals proving that even the darkest bargains can lead to the brightest beginnings.